I've spent 30 years in neurology, and I thought I'd seen every way the brain could betray the body. But nothing prepared me for the night I watched a woman fight her own hand as it tried to strangle her. Not metaphorically, literally. Her left hand wrapped around her own throat at 2:17 a.m., squeezing harder as she screamed for it to stop. And the most terrifying part? She had no control over it. Her brain was at war with itself, and her body had become the battlefield. I'm Dr. Michael. Before we dive into this case that still haunts me years later, I need to ask for your support. If stories like this move you, if you want to understand the mysteries of the human brain, please hit subscribe and leave a like. Your engagement helps share these medical mysteries with people who need to know that the brain is both our greatest asset and sometimes our strangest enemy. And leave a comment telling me what neurological conditions fascinate you most. Now let me tell you about Elizabeth Murray and the hand that became her enemy. November 8th, 2023, 1:47 a.m. Elizabeth Murray, 42 years old, high school English teacher, arrived at our emergency department 5 hours after suffering a stroke. Her husband Jeff had found her collapsed in their bathroom at 8:30 p.m., unable to move her right side, speech slurred beyond recognition. By the time the ambulance arrived, the critical window for clot-busting medication had already closed. She was rushed to our stroke unit, where I met her at 2 a.m. for neurological assessment. The stroke had damaged her left parietal lobe, the region that helps coordinate movement and spatial awareness. We stabilized her, started rehabilitation protocols, monitored for complications. Everything was textbook for a moderate ischemic stroke. Elizabeth's speech slowly improved over 3 days. Her right side weakness began to resolve. By day 5, she was walking with assistance, her prognosis cautiously optimistic. And then, on the 6th night, something happened that changed everything. November 14th, 2023, 2:17 a.m. The night nurse called me urgently to Elizabeth's room. When I arrived, I found her sitting up in bed, both hands wrapped around her own throat. But here's what made my blood run cold. Her right hand was trying to pull her left hand away, while her left hand was actively squeezing tighter. She was fighting herself. Her face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she was screaming, "Make it stop! I can't control it! It's trying to kill me!" I rushed forward and helped her right hand pry the left hand away from her throat. The moment I touched her left hand, I felt it resist with surprising strength, as if it had its own will, its own agenda. It took both myself and the nurse to fully restrain it. Elizabeth sobbed, cradling her left hand with her right as if it were a dangerous animal she needed to contain. "Doctor, what's happening to me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from the pressure on her throat. "Why is my hand doing this?" I had read about alien hand syndrome in medical school, seen maybe 2 documented cases in journals, but I had never witnessed it firsthand. It's one of the rarest and most disturbing neurological conditions that exists. The name sounds like science fiction, but the reality is far more terrifying than any movie. Your hand moves independently, performs complex actions, sometimes violent ones, and you have absolutely no control over it. It can button clothes you're trying to unbutton. It can throw objects across the room. It can reach for dangerous things, and in extreme cases, it can attack its own body. I ordered immediate CT and MRI scans. The imaging showed something we'd missed in the initial stroke: subtle damage to the supplementary motor area and the corpus callosum, the bridge of nerve fibers connecting the 2 brain hemispheres. Elizabeth's stroke had partially severed the communication between the left and right sides of her brain. The left hemisphere, which normally controls the right hand, was functioning relatively normally, but the right hemisphere controlling the left hand had become isolated, developing its own intentions without the moderating influence of conscious control. Over the next 72 hours, I watched Elizabeth's left hand develop what can only be described as a separate personality. It would reach for water when she wasn't thirsty. It would grab the nurse's arm when they approached. It would undo buttons her right hand had just fastened. And most disturbingly, it would move toward her throat or face when she tried to sleep, forcing her to physically restrain it with her right hand or ask us to secure it to the bed rail. What makes alien hand syndrome so fascinating to neurologists is what it reveals about consciousness itself. We think of ourselves as unified beings, one mind controlling one body, but the reality is far more complex. Your brain is essentially two separate processors working in harmony, connected by the corpus callosum. When that connection is damaged, the two hemispheres can develop conflicting intentions. The right hemisphere might want to grab something, while the left hemisphere consciously decides not to. And because motor control crosses over, the right hemisphere controls the left hand, while being unable to communicate its intentions to your conscious awareness, which primarily resides in the left hemisphere for most people. Elizabeth's case was particularly severe. I consulted with Dr. Philip Stone, our leading neurosurgeon, about potential interventions. We discussed the famous case of Dr. Karen Byrne from New Jersey, documented extensively in medical literature in 1998. Karen's alien hand would slap her face without warning, once even tried to choke her while driving. She learned to sit on her hand to keep it still. Her case became one of the most studied examples of how a damaged corpus callosum can create two separate wills within one body. I shared this with Elizabeth, hoping it would help her understand she wasn't alone, that others had faced this bizarre battle and survived. But knowledge didn't make Elizabeth's daily life easier. She couldn't work, couldn't be left alone, couldn't sleep without restraints. Her husband Jeff stayed by her bedside every night, sometimes waking to find her left hand had freed itself from loose restraints and was wandering toward her face. The psychological toll was enormous. She told me during one session, "Doctor, I feel like I'm being haunted by my own body. I look at my hand and I know it's mine, but it doesn't feel like mine anymore. It feels like an invader." We tried multiple interventions. Botox injections to temporarily weaken the muscles didn't help because the problem wasn't muscular weakness, it was aberrant neural signals. We tried cognitive behavioral therapy to help her develop coping strategies. We tried a specialized brace that limited the hand's movement while allowing some function. What finally helped was something unexpected. Occupational therapy focused on giving the alien hand purposeful tasks. We discovered that if Elizabeth consciously assigned her left hand simple, repetitive activities like squeezing a stress ball or tracing patterns, it was less likely to engage in unpredictable or violent behavior. Over 6 months, Elizabeth learned to coexist with her alien hand. It never fully came back under her conscious control, but she developed remarkable strategies. She wore a specialized glove with weighted fingertips that provided constant sensory feedback, helping her maintain some awareness of what the hand was doing. She kept it occupied with textured objects throughout the day. She learned to sleep with it secured in a soft restraint that allowed movement but prevented it from reaching her throat or face. The fascinating part, from a neurological perspective, was watching her brain adapt. Follow-up MRI scans showed the development of new neural pathways, alternative routes around the damaged corpus callosum. Her brain was quite literally rewiring itself, finding new ways to communicate between hemispheres. The violent episodes decreased in frequency. The hands still moved independently, but less aggressively. It was as if the two halves of her brain were learning a new language to speak to each other, slower and more difficult than before, but functional. I presented Elizabeth's case at a neurology conference in 2024, alongside historical cases like that of a man whose alien hand would light cigarettes immediately after his conscious self had put them out, creating an endless loop of lighting and extinguishing. Or the woman whose left hand would grab items off store shelves while she shopped, forcing her to have her daughter physically hold it down during errands. These cases reveal something profound about human consciousness. We are not as unified as we think. We are a collaboration of brain regions that usually work in harmony, but can, under the right circumstances, work at cross purposes. What struck me most about Elizabeth's journey was her resilience. She could have given up, become bitter, withdrawn from life. Instead, she became an advocate. She started a blog about living with alien hand syndrome, connecting with the handful of other documented cases worldwide. She returned to teaching, though she had to explain to her students why she sometimes wore a glove on one hand, or why that hand might suddenly grab a book she wasn't trying to pick up. 2 years later, Elizabeth came to my office for a follow-up neurological exam. Her alien hand was still alien, still moved with some independence, but the violent episodes had stopped completely. She had learned to work with it rather than against it. "I call her Lefty now," Elizabeth told me with a slight smile. "We're roommates who don't always get along, but we found a way to share the space." I asked her what she wished people understood about alien hand syndrome. She thought for a long moment and said, "That your brain can betray you in ways you never imagined, but it can also adapt in ways you never thought possible." I lost part of myself that night I had the stroke. But I also discovered strengths I didn't know I had. And I learned that consciousness is stranger and more fragile than any of us want to believe. Elizabeth's case taught me something I carry with me every day. The brain is not a simple machine. It's a collection of competing drives, desires, and intentions that usually resolve into what we experience as a unified self. But that unity is maintained by delicate connections that can be severed by a stroke, an injury, a surgery. And when those connections break, we glimpse something both terrifying and fascinating: the multiplicity that lives beneath our sense of being one person. If this story affected you, if it made you think about consciousness in a new way, I have something for you. I've compiled years of cases like Elizabeth's into a book called Forbidden Files: Medical Mysteries Science Struggles to Explain. It includes extended versions of the stories I share here, additional cases too complex for video format, and insights into what these rare conditions teach us about being human. You'll find the link in the description below. Every purchase supports this channel and helps me continue bringing you these extraordinary medical stories. The night I watched Elizabeth fight her own hand, I realized something profound. We are all, in a sense, struggling with parts of ourselves that don't quite align. Elizabeth's battle was just more visible than most. Her alien hand was a physical manifestation of the internal conflicts we all experience. The war between what we want and what we do, between intention and action. She just had the misfortune, and perhaps the strange fortune, of having that battle play out where everyone could see it. I still see Elizabeth annually for neurological monitoring. Her brain scans continue to show remarkable adaptation. Her alien hand still has moments of independence, but they're predictable now, manageable. She's learned to live split between two wills, one conscious and one not. And in doing so, she's become a walking testament to the brain's resilience and strangeness. If you found this story compelling, subscribe to this channel for more medical mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about the human body. Comment below and tell me, what would you do if part of your body stopped obeying your conscious mind? How would you adapt? Your thoughts might help someone else facing an impossible diagnosis. Until next time, remember, the brain is the most complex object in the known universe. And sometimes, that complexity reveals itself in ways that remind us how little we truly understand about who we are. See you in the next mystery.